Welcome back to the shop, friends. I was building some harnesses here, and I wanted to show you really quickly the way that I splice onto a factory harness. Now, I am loath to cut a factory harness, and sometimes there's just no way around it where you need to steal a little power off of a switch or something, maybe to run fog lights or lockers or air compressors on your rigs or vehicles where you need to tie into that system, and you want to do it in the cleanest, simplest way that's not going to damage the harness or do the least amount of damage. So I'm going to show you at the end of this video a no-cut way to do it, but sometimes there just isn't any option. So just simulate here that this is a factory harness, and of course our factory harnesses are typically going to be taped up with shielding and all of that. So I'll remove that and isolate that wire. So let's say, for example, that we wanted to hook on to the high beams, that we wanted to activate a relay to do like bar light or a light where we could use our dimmer switch to activate that relay. Now, how I'm going to do this is I'm going to isolate this wire, and one of the tools that's really helpful is a wire stripper. This is I think this is a Snap-on or a Blue Point, and how it works here. These used to be really expensive back in the day, but now they're pretty affordable. But they're really clever. You can see it's sized for your particular size of wire, so you find that, and then you just pull that off. You put that in there, and as you push the handle, it locks and bites that piece right there and strips off the end. If you're doing any amount of harness work, you can buy something equivalent to this for in the $30 range. So it's really handy for this. So what we're going to need to do is to be very, very careful, and we need to remove a little bit of the shielding on the factory harness. So what I'll do is I'll use the wire stripper, and I'll just pick the spot where I want it strip, and I'll just separate it like that, and then I'll come back in, maybe ½ inch or so, and I'll do the same thing, separate it. And now what I've done with the factory harness is I've cut both ends. You can do the same thing with a knife. However, you've got to be very, very careful, especially when you're working with delicate wire, because as you go around the shielding, the chance of cutting that wire is really, really high, and most likely you're going to do it, especially if you're working in an area that's tight and hard to get to. So it's important to have a very sharp knife. I'm going to be very carefully, I'm going to strip that shielding off of there, and definitely try not to mark that wire. Leave that wire alone. Usually you can, just a couple little cuts right there. If you can get one side going, usually you can peel it off. There we go. So now we have that copper is exposed there on our factory harness, and we're in good shape. We haven't cut it. We haven't damaged it in any way. Now there are those cheesy, hateful little plastic ones that you clamp on there, and you drive a little piece of aluminum or something down in there that don't get those. Those things will fail, and I've never had one that hasn't failed. But I'll tell you what, I've never soldered something that didn't work forever. I've never had a solder joint fail. So what I'm going to do on this is, let's say, so I've got about a ½ inch of that shielding taken off of there. I'm going to go, for my strip gauge, I'm going to go about 1.5 times, give or take, 1.5 times the length of that strip, and you'll see why here in a minute. So let's say this is the wire that I want to add on for my relay for a fog light, for example, right? Okay, twist them together, always clockwise. Now I'm going to lay this on the side here. I'm going to match that insulation like that, and I'm going to wind this very tightly across there. Don't overlap it, because you don't want to make it thicker than it needs to be. And if you do that 1.5 times, usually it'll just about make contact with the entire width of that bit that you stripped, right? So now we've got the new wire added on there to the old one, and it looks good. Now, shrink tubing is a wonderful thing. We've probably all used that stuff, right? But it's not always an option when you have, for example, when you've got a big plug. if you're splicing onto a big plug, to get a piece of shrink tubing that would be big enough to fit over these plugs, it would never shrink down, and it doesn't work. So sometimes you just have to use electrical tape, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So let's solder this. I'm reluctant to actually do solder on YouTube. You want to get hate, just pretend you know how to solder on YouTube. They all of the NASA. It's amazing how many NASA certified soldering experts there are in the comments. I had no idea. I'm going to let that solder permeate that whole. There we go. That looks nice. That's just never going to give us any trouble there. I mean, I know it's a pain to solder, but the equipment is, you can buy a decent solder gun for $25–30, and it's just no reason not to have one around. You're just not going to worry about it. In the middle of the night, because you did something halfway and your lights fail, I mean, I can't tolerate it. I can't stand doing things halfway anymore. Did it too many years. All right, so I like this. I've been using this silicone paste from 3M. It's really good for electrical connections. Is it necessary? I don't know. I don't use it when I use shrink tubing, because if you use quality shrink tubing, it kind of almost has something kind of built in that's like it. But that's going to help just from corrosion and keep it waterproofed. There we go. So now we've got that soldered in there. We've got our new tail of our piece there that we can go to our relay or whatever it is, and then we're going to have a nice bit of a nice reliable connection that's not going to give us problems. Actually, what I should have done is I should have soldered it from this direction. That way the wire would be coming out this way, and then I could have slid my factory shielding back over top that. But it doesn't really matter unless length is an issue. I can bend that over, and I can pull that factory shielding up over that like that. And then, of course, once you're done and you get that shielding where you want it, just take your tape and go around there and seal that up there, and then you'll have a nice connection. If you had to cut the shielding and you can't reuse it, I mean, you just can't go wrong with the old the plastic split loom stuff. This stuff's the wrong size, but it's got a split in it, and then you can work that back there, and of course cover that whole thing up, and then tape up the ends of that as well, and you'll get a nice connection that's just not gonna give you any trouble, and you can just not worry about it. Now here's a really clever way of getting stealing power for a relay for, as I said, light switches, whatever, without making any cuts in your wiring at all. So just imagine that this is kind of a representation of the fuse panel that you have under your dash or under your engine compartment. And I just recently found these. Actually, my friend John from Quadband, he uses these. And what this is this is the wrong size. This is for the big one, but if you have the mini fuse, you can get them from any size. What this does is that this this plugs in. Imagine let's say you're going to add you're going to add something to your high beams so that your bar lights come on, right? So, and then you locate the fuse that activates your high beams. Let's say it's this one right here, right? So you pull that fuse out, and then you insert this. It's just a little pigtail that comes with a double fuse deal. And it's 90 degrees, so it's very low profile. So what you end up getting is that you're stealing off a little pigtail, but you're also maintaining your original fuse. So let's say, for example, you'd had a 20 amp fuse or 15 amp fuse right there. You would put that in there. Now that's going to activate your high beams. You plug this in, everything's working as it did originally from the factory, but now you get a little pigtail that you can run over to your relay. That's a really nice system. So when you're done, if you want to sell the vehicle or you just change your mind, you do something different, there hasn't been anything damaged to the harness, nothing's been cut. You simply take this out, you put your factory fuse back in, and you're set up again. These are really, really, really clever. I bought, I don't know, maybe like a dozen of them or so on Amazon for $5, $6, $10, whatever they were, but I really like these things. This is a good option if you have access to your fuse panel. So that's probably about all we have time for today. Click the thumbs up if you enjoy these videos. So I think I'm going to start doing a little more, I guess, real focus on my how-to stuff, a little bit more focused to make it more searchable for guys. What I'm running into is guys will contact me and say, hey, I saw in a video like 2 or 3 years ago, you showed how to do thus and so. What was the name of that video? Like, oh, I don't remember. Sometimes I'll just kind of share things with videos that don't really relate. So I'm going to try to stay a little bit more focused and title them in a way where you could find that stuff to make it more searchable. So a lot of stuff coming up. I'm about ready to pull the trigger on the whole gas and water system. So as I said, we'll be using the roto packs. I got a couple different ideas on how to do the best way to do that. Of course, we're sourcing all the solar stuff. I'll be teaching myself how to do that, and we'll I'll keep it simple, so that if you need to add a solar panel to a van, you can search and find the video and hopefully follow the instructions, or probably more likely than not learn how not to do it. But we learn by doing. So I don't claim to be the expert with this stuff. I'm just we're just learning together. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next video.